Back to another Thirsty Thursday live stream. So hopefully everyone's going to have a good night tonight. You can ask questions, you know the drill. So tonight we're going to be talking about thin client, thick client hacking or pen testing with John Gaines. He's a pen tester, and we'll get into that in a moment. So if you guys have any questions during the stream, like I say, just throw it in the chat and I'll get to it whenever I can. So let's bring him on and he'll introduce himself. Hey, what's up, John?
How you doing?
Good. So welcome to the stream. I really thank you for your time and efforts tonight. So thank you for that.
Yeah, hopefully we can get this going consistently as planned. But anyway, I'll give a brief introduction. I think I'm approaching 9 years now in the industry. I'm a managing security consultant by day, and then I do some, stuff by myself or just involved in the industry by night under GainsSec, my own little thing. I do all kinds of offensive security for a long time. Everything from cloud pen tests, web apps, red team, complex red team engagements, phishing campaigns, basic mainframe I've done, basically everything you could think of. I've hacked it or tried. Physicals. So yeah, that's kind of my background. That's
cool. And thank you for that. And like, there's a lot of stuff there, right? Not everyone, and that's awesome because not everyone gets to touch all those things, including myself, right? I'm not a web app guy. Yeah, I tinkered with some. I can do a little bit of, but I can't do the extensive view or some other real web app guys that they use. Like I never even used Burp Professional. Burp Suite I always use. I don't even know what that looks like, but everyone has their niche. And just like maybe your background before you got into cyber, was it more development or web apps, like web development before, or was it like infrastructure networking? I don't even know. That's a good question because I really don't know what you did prior to even cyber.
So yeah. So I started my first job. I was hired by the college that I was attending, so to help redo their curriculum, basically to be a TA for the classes that I was supposed to be taking.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first job in cyber, and then I immediately, by the time I graduated there, that summer I started as a security consultant doing offensive engagements. So if you want to trace back to like my roots, it would be more. I mean, it depends on which story or how early you want to go. But one that I like, and I think a lot of people in the industry enjoy, especially younger people, are, I ran a RuneScape private server, so a video game private server exposed to the internet, off my home internet until we got a letter from my ISP saying, if you don't stop what you're doing, we're going to call the cops and cut off your internet. So, if you want to trace it to that, sure. I mean, my first website when I was 10, and I was on the internet for a very long time. So did I start as an official job before cyber? No, but yeah.
Okay, cool deal. So obviously everyone knows my story. My story is, networking systems, and then I led into cyber on accident by getting my PayPal hacked. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but and it's really interesting, right? And this is why sometimes when I'm getting into a web app engagement, and I have been thrown into a couple, maybe just less than one handful, and it gives me huge anxiety, right? Because yeah, you have a methodology, you have this, you have that, but after it gets to a certain point, like static and dynamic code analysis and all this stuff, and looking at what we really have to, I'm totally lost, and I'm on like forums and Discord servers and looking for help. But then when it comes on the flip side of that, right, like Active Direct or Windows or systems or networking, that's my bread and butter. So that came to me a lot easier, right? So, and that, we'll get into some questions that I have. So like, obviously the fundamentals of anything, right? Pen testing, cybersecurity, blue team, red team, purple team, etc. Like this audience may be crystal clear new, like super green, or they may be super pros. I don't know. But let's keep it in the super green area. So like, how do I gain a fundamental knowledge into pen testing or into cybersecurity or whatever you want to call it? What would be your advice for that?
Yeah, I always recommend consuming it in like as much as you can. And I don't, mean to a point of being burnt out, because when I say consuming it, I don't mean, like hands on the keys, like Googling and, downloading these things and trying to run these commands and learning about terminal. I mean, just like, change your homepage on your web browser to the Hacker News and just start reading an article you find interesting. I mean, look for a podcast. So when you're driving, find a book, not maybe technical book, just about hackers or whatever, maybe just click around your computer and like, be like, where do my documents folder sit on my Windows box comparative to my downloads directory, or like, where are programs stored? And you know what I mean? Just this type of curiosity. Look at the URL in your web browser. It's a mindset more than anything. And so anywhere you can try to trick your brain or start to expose yourself to that type of thinking, that's really the way you get into it.
Cool. And that's definitely intriguing, right? Because we take things for granted every day, right? We go to doc, and I'm a Windows guy, right? I'm not a Mac user. Yeah, when I'm doing my, my fun hacky sack and stuff, yeah, we're using Kali. But like my daily driver, where I'm talking to you guys on right now, is a Windows box, right? So when you really think about, all right, what is a System 32? What is the, drivers etc directory? Like, what is actually in here? And trying to tear apart, the operating system, just really see what's going on versus just, taking for granted every day when you download a picture, goes to your downloads directory, you just copy it, open it, whatever, and really understanding what things are happening. So that's actually, pretty good advice for gaining that fundamental knowledge, right? And if you're a Mac user, do the same. Go to, I don't even know. I have a Hackintosh because I'm too cheap to buy a Mac. But cool. So, and some other stuff that, I get a lot of questions on, and like, is formal training or formal education, like maybe a bachelor's degree or associate's degree or master's degree or whatever you want to talk about in computer science or cybersecurity or et cetera, or would you go down like the search route, like, OSCP or PMPT or CEH or Security Plus or whatever the other certifications are out there? What would be, John's perspective on that?
Yeah. So I actually did a lecture on this for the DEF CON Paris group. It was CVEs versus certifications versus degrees versus experience. And I interviewed 5 people in the industry, mostly people who hire in different organizations, and I got their perspectives. And basically what it boils down to is, if you are like super driven, because at the end of the day, so it's going to become a little bit of self-study anyway, then just go the self-study route. If putting money into it will motivate you, then try like a cert. And if like putting money into it and like just like being spoon-fed it, then you get a degree. And it depends on your learning style and your motivation, to be honest. So do you need a certification? Do you need a degree? It really depends on where you're applying, but for the most part, if you go to a boutique firm, absolutely not. But if you want to work at a bank, sure, it's going to be harder for you to get past without a 4-year degree, just past the HR window. So it really depends on the person. So
cool. Yeah, you can throw up that question. What about the cyber? So what about the cyber? What about the CompTIA trifecta? So in my opinion, I'll speak on mine. And if folks don't know what the trifecta is, it's an A+ Network Plus and Security Plus from CompTIA. In my opinion, I think it was super useful, right? I got my A+ after I got my MCSE for Microsoft training and Microsoft certification. And the CompTIA was the A+ was super hard for myself, right? It wasn't easy because, as a lot of people know, a lot of people that follow me, I wasn't a nerd. I don't really consider myself a nerd, and putting together computers, like the machine I just put together, I didn't have fun doing it. It's not fun for me. Networking, I think the Network Plus is super useful because I think I've said this when I was talking to Keith Barker, and can't hear you. Oh, you can't hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, let's see. Let me see if 1 second. Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Maybe it's just something going on, but I'm glad you can hear me. So yeah, so the Network Plus obviously is super useful if you want to learn more about the protocols and the methodology of networking, right? The OSI model. And then the Security Plus is the same thing, right? You're going to learn more of a lot of acronyms, hashes, cryptography, and all that stuff that you can utilize when now you go into blue teaming or red teaming to compromise or utilize those techniques against those. But yeah, that's my take on those three. What about you, John? Can you hear me? No? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I can hear you, John.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
So you went on a big rant, and I'm guessing you talked about your side of that.
The trifecta of the CompTIA A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus.
My opinions on that?
Yeah. So what is?
Yeah, those are all super basic.
So for someone that doesn't have, or just getting into cyber or getting into IT, do you think those are beneficial to get into maybe the OSCP or getting into more of even the hands-on stuff? Do you think that's necessary?
Necessary? No. Is it useful? Sure. If that's the only way you'll get exposed to those terms or those ideas, or that, the thing to understand about those, which will bother you as you gain the hacker mindset, is like, for example, Network Plus, like they say, like a MAC address is hard coded, like you can't modify that. Anyone,
Yeah.
right. So you just have to keep that in mind, that the certifications were made to prove what you know in a language that other people will understand. That's why the CISSP exists, so that you all speak the same language. So as long as you keep that in mind, sure. Yeah.
Cool. So then the next one is about hands-on training, right? Hands-on labs, whatever. You build your own home lab. You can use Hack the Box, Try Hack Me. And then this is, we'll get into what that topic is today: thin client and thick client hacking. So what is your take on like hands-on labs?
I mean, I got into it at a time where like that wasn't really a thing. I think towards the end of my college is when like Hack This Site or whatever came out and stuff like that started to exist. So when I started, like, it was just kind of a gray area. And I mean, what's nice about like thick and thin stuff, and really what that means in the context of, we'll get into that, but it tends to just be a lot of software anyway, so you don't really need permission legally. You do, but like, if you don't publish your findings or whatever, it's fine. Follow responsible disclosure. But if that's how you want to learn, or that's how it's going to work, that's good. I mean, you want to have at least a baseline, a tiny baseline. So, but there's a huge line. There's, things like the DVWA, Naval Web App, which is like so basic at its core, right? And then there's like, CTFs, which are like not, if that makes sense. So sure, if that's how you're going to learn the terminal commands, or if that's the only way you can, or that's how it interests you, then absolutely. Me, I've just been lucky enough that I do it, I learn on the job, even though that adds a different level of stress.
Cool. So yeah, so this, now we can segue into tonight's topic, right? So, let's talk about a little bit about thick client, thin client, zero client, whatever you want to call this, pen testing. Like, what is that, and what is it? Yeah, explain what this whole shebang is.
Sure. So thick clients, They're supposed to be softwares that you can run on your computer, and either the functionality can be run locally or utilizes like your computer or your servers like hardware to do it. Whereas a thin client, like, you basically log in and connect over the internet. And then, there's tiers of architecture. These are like really all you need to know, is that, there's one where it's like client directly to server. And then there's one where it's like client to like an app server or a different server that then communicates with the main one. So there's the 2-tier and the 3-tier. Those are the main things. In reality, though, when and this is at multiple firms I've worked, when they say thick client testing, it's really just like software. Doesn't matter if it's has internet connectivity or doesn't matter if it uses HTTP or .NET remoting, doesn't matter. It's just if it's a software that you like install, it's now a thick client pen test. So it's an important distinction, in my opinion, and really changes the whole game, if that makes sense, the whole engagement.
Yeah, it makes sense. So like whenever I thought about a thick client and a thin client is when I was a cloud system engineer, whatever, we would implement thin clients instead of like PCs when we were connecting to like a Zen server. Like you said, you can connect to Zen is from Citrix, and then you can, or VMware or VDI or Horizon View, whatever kind of server that we're, using the protocol PC over IP, right? So anytime we're connecting to these services or these servers, we're using a little toaster or a little thin client. So when I was thinking about thick client or thin client pen testing, I thought the application that was running the embedded application or the embedded OS that was running on this thin client, that's what we're going to test, right? To see if that's susceptible to any exploits in order to take over that thin client and utilize that thin client as a quote unquote man in the middle and use that to connect to the server and get access with the user, the current sessions that's logged in. That's when we were talking about this via text and talking about this tonight's topic, that's what came to mind. Does that make sense? Is that even on par?
Yeah. So like if you run like, oh God, it's been a long time since I used it, but like Zen Master or whatever, like
Yep.
a GUI kind of software that is not in the web browser and it connects to this, and yeah, sure, that would be a thin client, for example, sure. But it could also just be like like the photo viewer, like the preview app on your computer, like that is also, as a consultant, in my experience, if you're hired, if your org's hired to do that and you do this engagement, like that could also be considered a thick client pen test. Like I said, it's really just like a software pen test is how I like to think about it, because they're so odd. There's so many oddities and uniqueness about it. They don't really just fit into those two.
Yeah, fair enough. So like, what are your favorite engagements and why? Like when John gets his engagement, oh shit, like this is this week. Oh man, I can't wait to do this. Like, what is something that you thrive on?
I mean, sure, there's certain thick ones that are interesting. I mean, red team engagements are always really fun. Yeah, I don't know. I think externals are, I mean, my all-time favorites are external pen tests.
So what is an external pen test for those that don't know?
So an external pen test is when you, attack an organization or an entity via their internet exposed assets, etc. And why that's very interesting and unique and fun to me is that, as you get to bigger and bigger organizations, their external security posture gets, more and more hardened, which makes it harder to compromise them, right? And so you have to be, more creative, and you end up utilizing a lot of things, which I've tried to coin, called like what I call soft technical debt, which is basically, utilizing third-party things that you see this organization use, third-party services, even if it's not in scope. So like I can't compromise them, I can't physically hack them, right? But if I can sign up and make an account and use it how it's supposed to, but it helps me compromise them in the long, this organization, right? That's always really cool. Or if I find something like, for example, I found this bug tracker that this org had online for like 10 years. And that contained like the salt for these hashes I was able to dump from a web app they had exposed to the internet that I couldn't crack because I didn't have the salt, these types of things. But that's, besides the point from thick and thin stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think we touched on the thick and thin stuff. Like it wasn't very, very complex, right? It didn't seem very complex. Didn't have. I don't think an hour conversation needs to be done on thick and thin clients. Obviously, probably the best way to mess with that stuff is go on eBay, buy a thin client, and see what you can do, right? Like that's.
Well, or just, look at a software you have on your computer. What's nice about this thick thin, this software pen testing, if you want to call it that, is it really is the one type of test that truly does utilize the yin and yang mindset. When I install a Windows software, even if it doesn't go over the internet, right, I still have to look at the registry. I have to look at the file system. I have to look in memory. I have to look at, temporary files. I have to look at API calls, the Windows API calls it's doing. I'm using reverse engineering. I'm using forensics. I'm using network monitoring. I'm using, if it has web connectivity, I'm using, either Wireshark or Burp or Echo Mirage or any of these softwares. And then also, I'm going to throw it in DNSpy or Jira, and I'm going to try to decompile it, and so it really does utilize all your knowledge bases, as well as, opens new attack surfaces like client-side stuff. So that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it really is the only type of pen testing that is truly the yin and yang. What you learn in like digital forensics, or like it is directly applicable, right? Because you have to do this type of little reverse engineering stuff. So,
no, I think it's super intriguing, right? Like I've never done an assessment like that or an engagement like that. And, I had Hannah, on, like, she's a reverse engineer. Like I actually met her at B-Side Orlando. I took a reverse engineering course or workshop. Me and my buddy James, James 0 Day, and he signed us up for this thing. And I didn't know what the hell I'm like, yo, like, I don't even know what you got me into. This girl got open this, what is I can't even remember the app. It starts with a G.
Jira.
No, Jira?
Yeah, GHIRDA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing in here. And, so yeah, and it's true. Like there's so many avenues like on a pen test, and you never know what you're getting yourself into until you're on it. Like you said, like reverse engineering, forensics, like, yeah, like I did an engagement last year. Was it last year or something? Like it was a quote unquote pen test, right? But then we ended up doing e-discovery. Then we ended up using autopsy. Then we used an in-case it went down this rabbit hole into a lawsuit. And then it's like, now you have chain of custody things. And it's like, you're there just for one thing and you can get into a whole meat and potatoes. But that's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting stuff. So yeah. So I guess, like, how do you stay up to date? Like all the stuff that you're learning, all the stuff that you're, us with a family, we have our outside, distractions. Like I go to the gym, you like to skateboard, like we have our outside distractions. After 9 to 5, we have our families to deal with. How do you stay so relevant? Like, how do you stay so on top of the game?
Yeah. You pick and choose. I do a lot of different types of engagements. I don't do them all consistently. I don't do like cloud, then web, then, so there'll be blocks of time where, maybe I'll be focusing on one or the other. The short answer is, you keep notes. I have a giant commands file that's just like all these commands I've used and why and what they do, as well as, a tool suite. So here's my thick client tool suite. Here's my, reverse engineering tool suite. Here's my web app tool suite, and I keep those. Really, it's notes and stuff like that. You relearn faster or refresh faster. And the biggest thing you have to understand, you have these notes, you have your checklist, you have your tool suite, right? You're being hired to do an engagement, based off your skill level against that app or that target at this point in single point in time, right? They're not looking, or they're not expecting the greatest hacker of all time, and you're not, especially when you aren't focused on one service line. So you do what you can, right? And yeah, I mean that's you give the most value to your client. At the end of the day, that's all really you can do, right? But to boil it down to one thing is just keep notes of what you do. That's it.
Yeah, and that's something I need to practice, right? At least for me, I can't speak on everyone. I hate documentation. I try to keep everything in my head. I have some documentation, but it's like ghetto rigged, right? I resort to Google a lot, and I thank God for Callie's auto save or whatever. You stop typing something, and it auto brings it out, and you just change some of your commandlets, right? But on the flip side of that, like if you don't take notes, you're going to be scrambling, right? Like you said, like the web app stuff, thin client, red teaming, like each engagement is so different, right? In red team, you probably use more of C2s like Cobalt Strike or Sliver or whatever you're going to be doing in a red team engagement, right? So I have a question about like getting into this field. And if someone wants to get into this field, do you think it's better to work for like a consulting firm first, or like, okay, I want to be like a red teamer at, I don't know, State Farm or something? Like, do you feel as though like being an internal offensive person will benefit you, or being a offensive person for a consulting firm?
So I've never worked internally at a large org. I've only attacked most of them. And I worked with them, right, as the point of contact or as the client themselves, or who I'm presenting. So I think it's first of all, like you'll be a security engineer most of the time if you go internally at an organization, and that has its own different, I guess, job, like pieces, responsibilities in the job description. Like if you purely want to just be hacking, consulting is the route to go. If you are okay with, I don't know, like implementing the fixes that you find hacking, maybe security engineer. If you want to do more source code review and not, against one app consistently, or, help build an app internally, but then also attack it as well as you're building it, maybe, right? You go internal. But fresh out the gate, I think consulting is a great path to start. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that would be the best route as well. And the reason being, like you said, if you're in-house, you're targeting just your own self. At least like if you're a consultant, you have that ability to broaden that horizon, right? And you can attack different kind of clients. Like you said, you can, some of the big clients, you can do small clients, social, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of techniques. And then you can find what you really are intrigued with and then go down that path. Because I don't, this is my advice, right? Like I tell everyone, try not to be the best at everything, because you're never going to be the best at nothing, right? And that's where like, where my niche is, me personally, is, like I say, the network and system side. The external stuff is fun too, like you said, because if you know how to browse the internet, you know what BGP is, you know how DNS work, DNS zones, and all the infrastructure that the internet runs on. It's fun, right? I don't know anything about code, so I shy away from that because it's an insecurity of mine, right? And so I think like finding that little niche, finding that little spot that you enjoy, going down that path and perfecting that would be my advice. What would be yours?
Yeah, I mean, there's two paths that it generally goes through, right? You become a managing consultant or you become a principal, and managing consultants tend to be, expert at a lot of things and a master of none, right? And then principals choose like maybe one, maybe two service lines or types of pen testing where they become hyper specialized in. But something that a lot of people, including myself, like miss or forget about is, like for example, you might not know a lot about thick or thin client pen testing, but you know more than 99.9% of the world as you sit right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So be sure you may not be the number one, but to be a principal level, for example, you don't have to be the number one. You just have to know more than the 99 point, I don't know, 8%. You just have to know a chunk more, and specialize in it. And the thing that if that's what you choose to do, that route, that specialized route, you do it long enough, whether you know exactly why this deserialization vulnerability exists, or how to find it, you're going to be exposed to it more and more over time regardless. What's nice about the other route, this generalization is, you can, depending where you work and how it works. That's why I think boutique firms, smaller offensive firms are a lot better than the big guys. You can get exposed to these different things and you become a jack of all trades, and there are benefits and downsides to both of those. But so personally, I went the route where, I like to all different clients, all different targets, different sizes, different everything, different types of engagements. I don't want to work for just one cohort. I'll do it if they pay me enough, but I like, being exposed to different service lines, to being different engagements. Everything's different. I like that.
Yeah. You thrive on the change. You thrive on
the challenge.
Instead of like, okay, we have this complacent network. We know what it is. Yeah, we update it every 20 years, and make changes because you don't want to ever make a change because Joe Blow is going to complain that the interface changed and now everyone's going to be bitching. So yeah, I totally get that. I get that. So I want to, move into a segue into something that, like me personally, I'm sure a lot of people go through this, is burnout, right? Like, and just the mental health aspect of just like, especially in this field, right? Because sometimes we're just working, and like, you don't even look at the clock, right? And it's like, oh shit, it's 10 o'clock at night, it's 11 o'clock at night. And you're like, you get burnt out. So the first question, how can we avoid getting burnt out? Like, what are your recommendations? What do you do?
Yeah. I'm the wrong person. I mean, I can give my advice, but I like to call it my mild autism. I get obsessed and addicted to things. So to the point where I do get burnt out, then I'll take a break and then I'll get back into it. For example, there are things that are like beyond that cycle, but most things are like that. So like, I mean, avoiding burnout is, even, for example, my first job, I worked 10, 14-hour days, like literally 14-hour days for probably 2 years nonstop. And I didn't get, rewarded or whatever, recognized in a way that I thought was fit. And that ended up burning me out. And that took many years. The problem is when this is your job and you're burnt out, let's say from, web app hacking, but you're hired to do this, that's your living. It doesn't matter if you're burnt out. That's what you have to do every day, right? It doesn't matter if you take a week off because you're going back to it. And when it's part of your identity, when it's something you enjoy and love, when I switch jobs, like I'm itching to, I need something to hack, or I start to have, bad thoughts, right? Like it's such a huge part of me, that even when I'm quote burnt out, which, and to be honest, I have been for a long time at this point, but I can never give myself enough space to get past it. So you have to understand that you may love this, you may want to spend all your time in it, and you may work, and you may, really jump through the ranks, or, your career may get to a point, right? But you're going to get, when that burnout comes, you have to understand now you're stuck here and you're going to be doing this no matter what anyway. So, whether you choose to burn that candle fast and quick, right, you're ending up at the same finish line, which is doing this for a living. So my advice would be, enjoy it, take a step back, force yourself to take a step back. If you are the type of person that can do, moderation, good for you. That was obviously the best case. If you're not, just know that, it is what it is, basically.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I do the same thing. And that's why this little slogan came out, right? Get hacked or get jacked, or get jacked or get hacked, right? Because I was starting to get like that. And when James came down and the other kid came down from California to Florida to go to this B-side, I was feeling that way. And it was like mentally fucking me up. You know what I mean? It's like just work, and then like it's not only my day job, right? I do this content creation, and then I get a million questions from a million different, I'm no John, like these other guys. I can only imagine how, like, what they get. I'm just like a guppy in the sea, but it's like, and I try to be as nice as possible. I try to be as diligent, responsive, and all this stuff, because sometimes it's a lot, man. Like, and I was getting to I was even talking to my friend James. I was like, hey man, like, how do I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be able to do this, right? Like, I may just make my video, upload it, and just be that person to, like, okay, like when I get to it, I'll get to it, you know? But then it's like, on the flip side of that, it's like, I literally say in my video, like, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. And it's like, man, maybe I should restructure that and say, please Google it first. And if you can't find the answer, then reach out and see if I can help you, right? Because in this industry, understanding how to research and understanding Google Docs and Googling, because you're going to be Googling for the rest of your life if you're in this industry. Like, yeah, but it was super, super stressful. So the reason I made that little slogan was just like for my mental health, because it's like, shit, man, like, I was going through personal stuff. I was going through personal stuff last year and the beginning of the year. But, on top of that, it was like just, day job. And then it's like, oh, okay, I want to be able to put content out. And I was really getting to the point, like, I love everyone that I'm trying to help, but I needed time for myself, And I think that's the most important thing, is remember, you come first, because if you're not healthy and loved and all that stuff, how can you provide that on others? But yeah, that would be my little
Yeah, it's been a while since I've heard this, but it used to be said a lot that people don't last doing offensive stuff, because it's so stressful. And I mean, it's still, I've been doing this, for, I guess, over 8 years now, and I still get the stress the same on the engagements. Like, if I don't find something interesting in the first day or two of a week engagement, I'm stressed. Given it doesn't happen that often anymore, but I'm stressed. I hope I found everything. I hope I did a good enough thing, right? Oh God, I have to write this report, the worst part, da da da. That's still a constant cycle, and that stress of, like, I need to be the best, I need to do the best, I need to find everything, I need to compromise this, I need to get all the goals done. Like, that is, of course, very detrimental to your mental health, and it does require you to love it, at least love it enough to get to a point where you don't have to research for 15 hours a day to reach your goals, basically, to provide value to the client. What's interesting, and I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but Julian Assange in his 60-minute interviews talked about how skateboarding and hacking are the same, where it's these individual people who are trying to prove themselves that they're the best at this one technique or doing this one trick, and there's some weird connection with that. And what's interesting about that too is Rodney Mullen, the grandfather, also said the only thing he's ever found that reminds him of street skating is hacking. So very odd, very different people, but there is some connection to it. And it's the same thing. You don't want to be the consultant or the pen tester that codes with no findings. You know what I mean? Like, that's you don't want to do that. So yeah, it's very stressful.
So have you ever found? So I can talk about like a little subcontracting gig. I think I did right after I did. I think 2019. I think it was right after the OSCP training, and I thought doing the OSCP, you're going to be some head honcho, but I just learned how to do some buffer overflows and CTFE things, and I didn't really learn much. That's besides the point. But when I went on to this engagement or whatever you want to call it, like there was a 2 Windows domains, two DCs, and I think like 6 or 7 servers. And obviously you always have, even this is my recommendation. I'm glad I saw that in that environment, because anytime if it's a small client that has 10 computers, right? If that primary DC goes down, none of those 10 people can authenticate and work, right? So never think it's like, oh, this is a small organization, I'm just going to have one DC and one GC, a global catalog, and whatever. I don't want this to be a Microsoft fucking Active Directory session, but in this engagement, like they had it pretty hardened at that point. I think it was, they were going from 2012 to 2016 Windows Server, and everything was fully patched and the whole shebang. And this is one thing I really enjoy. I really enjoy social engineering, maybe because it's easy for me to talk to people. It's just easy for me to shoot the shit. And I just talk easily, like, especially like I was able to get someone's password at the gym in an hour because he had a New York Rangers hat on, right? And his password, obviously no one will ever notice, but his password was the King of New York Lundqvist, right? And the Lundqvist is a goalie that's retired from the Rangers, but his was the King of New York, and I was like, oh, it's for Lundqvist, because I was asking him about, you do your social engineering, you start getting to know someone, and I was able, and they used something called Okta. Okta is a another authentication pattern for, and in the back of Okta, it authenticated, and they used something called SailPoint. SailPoint is another IAM identity. So to make a long story short, like I was able to get their credentials and get in that way instead of actually hacking something or using Responder, listening to an LTLMV2 hash, taking that, using, whatever, Impacket, or, trying to get UPN names and get, SID identifiers and whatever. And it was just like, it took me 7 hours just to shoot, just to find out, like I did everything in my willpower, and I was a little new, so I was just like spraying and praying like a script kiddie, and I didn't get anything. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use what I know pretty well, which is talking shit, and I just utilized that, and I was able to get credentials, and I was able to get in, and then once I was in, since it's a little organization, this is a lot of people fail, and if you're a sysadmin, please change this. Say for example, I want to add John to a network share. If it's a small organization like 10 users, John's probably going to be a part of the everyone's group. The everyone's group is probably going to be linked to a domain admin account or enterprise admin or whatever, just because it's like, oh, we're not a target. We're a little shop. I don't ever want to have access denied for, NTFS permissions or share permissions. Let's fucking add everything to everyone. And that's what they did. And, Sally Mae, the receptionist, she had DA credentials, and I was able, that's how I got in. But yeah, that was pretty fun. But yeah.
I mean, that's pretty rare that an internal engagement allowed social engineering.
Yeah.
Kind of ruins the whole point. But yeah, I mean, I've done some interesting internals where, it's hardened and, you don't have an Apache Tomcat server with default creds, right? So what are you going to do? Yeah, it gets to be challenging, but I can't think of a time where I failed. Sometimes you end up like really doing some Hail Marys, like looking for web apps that are locally hosted, seeing if you can compromise those. And I remember one, which wasn't Apache, but it was interesting. They were using AD Manager from ManageEngine, which all of their software is absolutely trash. And it turns out that they were good. They didn't use the built-in administrator account, but every time you updated it, it reset the default administrator password. So that, it's just like silly stuff like that. Another one, we captured a hash, but we were on their dev forest, and we couldn't touch their main forest. And we couldn't find any vulnerabilities on on either of them that would let us compromise past that. So all we did was we had these hashes for their dev side, and I said, well, Gaines J at dev environment, and then J gains at prod, like maybe they reuse their passwords, and turns out they did, and that's how, they didn't have any vulnerabilities in that sense. So it's stuff like that. Yeah, internals, they get challenging when you get to a point, even in big organizations when they're good. But
Yeah, and then like this will probably be the last story, and I actually made a video on this recently about RDP and FTP, and I'd set up my own little lab at home to try to simulate that real environment, and it was really interesting because I went to this domain. You do your recon, your subdomain finder, and blah 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 blah, and I was able to, like, oh shit, like ftp.corporation.com, and I went on to Shodan to verify. Obviously, you can do your Nmap, but I like to run it in a few different places just to make sure that that port is really open. And obviously, you can use Netcat as well and listen to port 2021 or 3389. We'll get into that in a second for RDP. And then I was able to find remote.corporation.com and FTP. And then on the flip side of that, then you can use hunter.io to find out users for that, the whole recon. And I was able to literally find everything and then just call in as pretty much like the MGM hack, right? Call in. I can use a spoof number to show like I'm calling within, right? And that goes through what's called SIP trunks, and through the telephony system and everything like that. But on the flip side of that, I was like, hey, like this is Sally from whatever. I need my password reset. Bada bing, bada boom. I got it reset. So whatever I needed to get it reset. I love the Rangers, and I went to open up the MSTSC, which is remote desktop, and then I was able to put remote.corporation.com, used Sally as a username. I love the Rangers because I just got that password, and bada bing, I was in. And it was a RDS server, remote desktop services. So how that really works is it's not just RDPing into a server, because Sally, the receptionist, doesn't have access to a server, right? They have access to their session within a terminal server, the old school way. So there's sessions that are authenticated with CALs, client access licensing. So with that, then you can utilize that. And then when we can, there's commands you can run, and you can see which sessions are active on that server. And then we can try to take over, and then we can do whoami-priv to see, to see what the permissions that whoever is logged in as, what their permissions are. And, then, you can, that's when you can shoot up like Bloodhound, the Sharphound, and see like the Google Maps of, Active Directory. And I was able to get into their FTP server, and they were running on IIS 8. So they were hosting it on an older version, so it wasn't patched either. And I had a pretty fun thing with that one. But that was an external, so going back to John's point, like that was an external, and they're fun because it gives you more research to do, and you have to do more reconnaissance and more due diligence. But yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, internals are very fun when the scope's good and you have the time, because they are very time consuming when you're trying to Google stuff or Google dork, or really I call it search engine dorking, because you want to use more than just Google, because Baidu and the index will have different results and respect a little less respect, like robot.txt and those crawlings and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've told you the time that I got that CISO fired via an external. That I kind of mentioned a piece of it earlier, but it's a big story that I've talked about 1,000 times. I actually did a lecture also at the DEF CON Paris group about how I compromised $1 trillion organization for under $150. And that was a red team, utilizing certain types of phishing externally and trying to get in. A very mature organization, obviously. Um, so, that's fun. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, man. No, and obviously, I don't want to take too much of your time. We're about 50 minutes in, and I guess we'll leave. There's from up here. It's only like 8 people on this live. I'm not sure if there's any questions that anyone may have, and we'll hold it open for a few more minutes. And if there's any questions after the live is over, you can throw it in the comments below, and I will try to get it as soon as I can. But before we end things, and while we wait for people, John, how can people connect with you? You have your GainSec thing, like any way they can connect with you on LinkedIn or whatever platforms you have.
Yeah, I mean, gainsec.com, you'll find everything. All my stuff's linked there, but if you just search GainSec, I'm pretty much everywhere. Not TikTok, obviously, for obvious reasons, but I'm on most apps, and I'll eventually see it. I think probably X, formerly known as Twitter, or LinkedIn, that's fine, are probably the best ways to reach out to me. So
cool. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Like I said, if there's no questions have came in yet in the last minute or so, if anyone has any questions, just hit us up on social media or leave a comment in the description. I'm sure John will see it. If John doesn't, I can always forward it to him. And yeah, man, I thank you so much for joining tonight, and bless you and the family, and keep in touch.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I think what is the best way to find what is it?
The best way to find you boutique firms you were referring to versus the big name firms. Yeah. Great question. So, InfoSec Twitter is a great one. Googling is a great one. Just if they don't have a job opening doesn't mean you can't reach out. Through recruiters, even you could talk to some recruiters. I found my first job actually on Craigslist. Hackers Wanted, and it turned out to be a legit org that's still around today. So, looking around, if you have the social capacity to go to like a conference, that's definitely the easiest. But those aren't every day, or maybe not near you. So really, it's just Googling and stuff like that. You have to know the industry is it's pretty small, but also not super exposed. So if you just search, I don't know, web app pen testing, and look for these small firms, and then go to Twitter, for example, and see if they have people who work there on there, you could kind of tell who are legit and who are just mom and pop shops, or supposedly pen test firms, if that makes sense. And yeah, maybe look at some of the tools that you use, maybe the ones built into Kali that you use that you don't know who actually makes them. Sometimes some small firms come out with some cool stuff and you don't realize it. So.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. Yeah, and I would have said just create a make sure you have a LinkedIn. You can connect with folks. You can go on jobs, and you can just research and see what fits your criteria, right? Whatever floats your boat, and I think that will be super beneficial. And come at these, if you're shooting a message to someone on Twitter or LinkedIn, my recommendation always is to be there with a purpose. Don't be like we say in New York, like gophers. Just it's give and take, right? Don't just be over there just trying to use someone, get over on someone or one up someone. You know what I mean? Just be genuine. Maybe don't just throw don't just throw something in their DM. Follow them for a minute, engage in some of their posts, yo, I like what you do, blah blah blah, and then you say, shoot on a DM saying, hey, I really enjoy what you do. Just want to know if there was any openings, or at least a conversation or some shit like that, But,
Yeah, buttering people up definitely helps. And when it's a boutique firm, showing that hunger or that professionalness definitely helps.
Yeah, cool deal. Sounds good, man. So again, that was a good question. That was a good way to finish the evening. So I really, really enjoy your time, John. We'll be in touch. like I said, bless up with the family, the little one, and I'll talk to you in a bit.
All right, man.
Much luck, Kevin.